All right. Hi, I'm Derek. I'm an imposter, a software engineer at Aspect. I'm the author of the Publish to BCR GitHub app, and I'm a maintainer on our open source rule sets. Today, I'd like to tell you about one of our rule sets, Bazel-lib, and how it can make your lives easier. So there are a lot of common problems that pretty much every Bazel user will run into at some point or another. And although these problems seem relatively simple, the solutions to them often aren't very straightforward, and Bazel only gets you part of the way to solving them. The goal of Bazel-lib is to bridge this gap by providing high-quality solutions to the most common problems so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So Bazel-lib is our general-purpose starlark library. It's used by all of our other major rule sets, including rules.js, rules.ts, rules.oci, and rules.py, which my colleague Matt will be presenting on right after. It comprises 7 toolchains and 38 rules. It's very actively maintained, and of course, it's Bazel-mod compatible. So in this talk, I'm going to go through several problems that build file authors and rule set authors run into, and tell you how Bazel-lib will help you to solve those problems. Let's start out with flags. What flag should you set? So there are a lot of them. I counted 581, but someone else said there was 1,000. So the answer is that it's probably somewhere in the middle. If you haven't seen it already, I highly recommend checking out Ulf Adams' analysis of every single flag and his recommendations. It's as fun as it sounds. The problem with flags is that the defaults aren't always what you want. There are some flags you need to enable to address performance. There are other flags that just fix bugs. And there are certain flags you want set on your local machine that you don't want on CI and vice versa. So it can be really overwhelming trying to figure out what to set. Well, the good news is that you can just trust us at Aspect. We've worked with over 40 clients, and so we have a pretty good idea of what most people want to set most of the time. And so we've distilled this into a set of our own flag recommendations. So in order to use our recommendations, you can use this macro write aspect Bazel presets. This creates a runnable target that will generate a bunch of preset files, Bazel-rc files, into your source tree, which you can then just include in your own Bazel-rc file. We also generate one that you should only add for CI. If you update Bazel-lib, and if our recommendations have changed, you'll receive a failing test that prompts you to rerun the command. Speaking of writing things to the source tree, how do you do that in general? So there are many reasons why you might want to write to the source tree. You might want to vendor files like we just did with our presets. You might have tooling outside of Bazel that doesn't understand the output tree. Or you might just want to check in test snapshots or generated documentation. So we provide a macro, write source files, and that will take any target file or directory, and it will write it directly to the source tree. It creates a runnable target, and it also stamps out a diff test so that if what's in your generated output tree ever diverges from the source tree, you'll receive a failing test, and it will tell you which command you need to run again to re-update those files. Write source files works with directories, which is something you always have to double check, Bazel rules. And you can chain them hierarchically. So you can have one write source files to rule them all, and it can update all of the other ones. Okay, moving files around. So this is something that seems like it should be relatively simple, but it's not super trivial. Let's illustrate this with an example. Let's say you have a directory artifact and you want to include files from other targets and a directory from another target. How would you do this? Well, you could write a gen rule, but gen rules can't produce directories, so you'd have to archive it. You could maybe create a new Bazel package and then use copy file and copy directory from skylib, and that would work for this case. But let's say you need to do something more complicated. You need to take some file from a folder, or you want to glob over a folder, remap some paths, reroute file trees, and that's when you start to get into custom rule territory. And we feel that this is common enough that we wrote this Swiss Army knife of a rule called copy to directory. And what that will do is it will take all of the targets and sources and copy them, but it will also perform a bunch of transformations. So you can glob which files to include or exclude. You can remap paths, you can reroute file trees, and you can actually do a lot more. So you should go and check out the documentation. Now, what's extra cool about this is that we've optimized it. So it This actually uses a custom toolchain that we wrote in Go, and it uses hard links rather than copies by default for generated files. So that's a lot faster. It also runs copies in parallel, and we modify the default execution requirements. So for example, it doesn't need to run on RBE. We do similar optimizations for our other copy rules, so you should check those out as well. All right, let's talk about manipulating common types of files. So Bazel-lib provides a JQ toolchain, which you can use to generate and manipulate JSON files. You can see, for example, how easy it is to just remove dev dependencies from packaged JSON file. We have a similar toolchain, YQ for YAML, that does pretty much the same thing. And we have this rule expand template. And what that allows you to do is take any generic template file and substitute variables into it. So these could be arbitrary variables, make variables, location expansions, or stamp variables. Speaking of stamping, so we've been through a number of cases about how Bazel-lib helps build file authors. Let's talk about rule set authors now. Starting with stamping. So stamping in Bazel is a little bit awkward. You enable it with --stamp, but only built-in rules are aware of this and can work with it. And any custom rules you write aren't aware of this flag. And so that means rule set authors need to implement their own magic to work with this flag. And if everyone's implementing it slightly differently, that can lead to bugs which break determinism, because rules always have access to the status files, even without declaring stamp. And so it can you can have bugs that break determinism. So rather than everyone reinventing the wheel here, Aspect Bazel-lib has provided a standard way to implement stamping in your rules. All you need to do is import these stamp attributes that we provide into your rule attributes. And then you just need to call maybe stamp in your implementation to check if you should stamp. This will check for the presence of the --stamp flag, but it will also evaluate it against stamp attributes directly passed into the rule. But let's talk about variable expansion. So in your rules, you might have some attributes where you want to expand different variables. So Bazel provides context.makeExpand variables. However, this does not work with the very useful general style variables. And there are some other variables that we at Aspect think are useful to include, but they aren't included by default. So we provide this function expand variables, which works for predefined variables and toolchain variables, but it also supports the very useful general style variables and some others that we found useful. How do you efficiently copy files? So there are some rules that need to do a lot of copy file actions within them. We have a couple of these in rules.js, and we're dealing with NPM packages, so they might need to be copying thousands of files within the rule. So if you recall, we have that optimized toolchain for copying files. We actually expose the implementation of that rule so that you can directly use it within your own rules to use our toolchains to do all the copying for you. As a reference, we found that compared to our previous bash implementation, for rules that need to copy thousands of files, we found there was about a 7x speed up using our new toolchain. So in order to use this toolchain, all you need to do is import this action. You pass in the rule context and then whatever arguments the particular copy function needs. All right, so I would like to announce that Bazel-lib 2.0 is here, or it was supposed to be by the time of this presentation, but it's actually in a release candidate currently, but you can use it. It features a brand new tar toolchain, which uses BSD tar, and it exposes a public API for the manifests. We also have support for the brand new JQ 1.7, which has much wider platform support than previously. We also, of course, have some breaking API changes, which make it a bit nicer to use. Thank you very much for your time. If you'd like to try out Bazel-lib, I highly recommend starting out with our write aspect Bazel presets macro and go from there. Thanks.